Hi there everyone, welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawwalker, your host, and today we're going to be checking out this new album, Exister by The Soft Moon. The Oakland-based solo project of Luis Vasquez that has been putting out some really solid post-punk, industrial rock, darkwave, and general synth-pop or goth-ish tracks for the past decade or so. I want to say my introduction to The Soft Moon was with 2015's Deeper, an album that I thought took a lot of classic industrial ideas and refocused them in a much fresher, more hot and hip part of that sound and style. I did also enjoy a decent chunk of Criminal. I thought that there was a lot of things on that record that were really fresh, but I wasn't nearly as hooked with a lot of the songs on that album. And now we've got Exister, which is kind of a step backwards in mostly a good way from Criminal. It's still trying things, but they're really taking from a lot of early industrial and goth, namely Skinny Puppy to my ear, and they're updating and refining those classic sounds and mixing them in with their own brand of clean, focused production, which most of the time is solid, but it's not exactly the most original approach. Industrial and post-punk as a whole is kind of a hard genre to stand out in and really define and really flex your creative muscles before it becomes something else in some other weird subgenre. So it ends up being pretty easy to compare this project with the classics because there very simply isn't enough rope to get that far away from the original ideas. It's a pretty linear path, actually. Most of this album draws mainly from Skinny Puppy or Joy Division or even like Depeche Mode, like sounds that have been tweaked to fit a modern audience here are pretty much what most of this track listing consists of. Which is fine, it sounds perfectly good to me, and with the limitations of a genre that I do love, it is hard to put the blinders on when it comes to these similarities sometimes, but even still, there are just moments here where I'm getting deja vu more so than usual. Like the beat from the second track, Answers, which is very, very reminiscent of Three Teeth's Degrade, which in itself is very reminiscent of the beat from Warlock by Skinny Puppy. It's delineations on top of inspirations and influence. But at the very least, as far as being derivative, it's still pretty solid material for the most part, and looking at everything here at face value, it's still a fairly solid collection of tracks that I think is more or less enjoyable all the way through, despite some fluctuations in writing quality. The opener, Sad Song, is a pretty great way to start off the album with a more melodic, slow burn that sets a really cool mood for the album. I'm also a big fan of the vocals on this track, which are surprisingly emotive and at points hypnotic. This sound is immediately suplexed into the next track, Answers, which hits on a much heavier marching beat with very machine-like precision that is quite catchy, and the walls of synths are noisy and fill out the mix quite nicely. And there's a lot of really solid dynamics here from track to track. There's quiet songs and loud songs, and songs that know how to subtly build on their more atmospheric elements. Become the Lies is a very chuggy track with a chunky New Order style bass line that is just washed in tons of reverb, again, really digging the vocal work here as well. Face Is Gone is a bit more of an original cut with a fresher angle of approach, but it ends up being a little bit of a creative misstep in my opinion, as instead of this creeping, building tension that the track I think was intending to create, instead the song roughly shifts from these twitchy, glitch-ridden passages into these quieter parts that don't really seem to know where they're going, and the vocals also start to get a little bit played out here too by the end of the track. The follow-up, Monster, is similar to the last track in that it's toying with some more slow, brooding sounds, but ends up dragging pretty quickly, and to make matters worse, the aggressive cutting edge isn't really present on this song. It's a much more mellow track that lacks a good, multifaceted approach, and so it's mostly forgettable. The Pit picks things back up and delivers this noisy scratching at the beginning of the song into a subdued beat which shifts from more aggressive percussion into some hypnotic drones. Compared to the last couple of tracks, this song is a lot more balanced and actually does end up feeling like the track is kind of properly building as the song sort of becomes more and more gargantuan in sound and then just crumbles and then stops. Nada is another post-punk heavy track that has a nice downbeat bass line. The rhythm section of all of these songs here is pretty much the best parts of the song on the project. This song is no exception. But past that, the vocals are a little bit bland, and I can't help but feel like the harsh noise that the last track ended with was a bit of an empty promise with how it leads into this track, which is a good little song overall, but I kind of would have liked to have seen a lot more chaotic, more noise-heavy song as a follow-up instead of this decent at best post-punk track. Stupid Child ends up being the album's only interlude track that rips through some incredibly loud, noisy punk with these sirens over top. My only complaint is that everything is very washed out, especially because you don't really get more of this sound and style on the next song, Him, which is one of the better cuts on the album, but again, a lot of the material here that I wish was getting more attention, right when I want to see things develop, it's just cut off and we go into another like post-punk cut, which is fine, but I just wish that this album would actually actually flesh out its ideas fully instead of just cutting them off. And like I said, Him is one of the better tracks here with these very wet reverb heavy vocals that fade in and out of the beat, which hits a great double time at the end of the track. Unforgiven is one of the more interesting cuts here with this beat that is just raw, fast-paced industrial with these vocals that are super reminiscent of Pharmakon, really extreme, intense delivery from all parties here. I think it is probably the strongest song on this half of the album. Existor closes the album with another slow, brooding track, which is a little bit better than the other slow, brooding tracks, but after Unforgiven, it feels like a little bit of a cop-out. Like, I like this song, but I like it in the same way that I like other drone projects, and I'm not really intensely engaged with it like I was the last track, so it is just kind of a bummer overall. So Existor, it's not a bad album. There's a few pretty good, even exceptional tracks, but there is a lot more here that is either filler or doesn't really venture into the ideas that they present nearly as much as they should. I think that this is a pretty great album to listen to if you need to focus and get some work done. I bet it would be a great listen in the car. I got some good work done at the gym listening to this album, but it doesn't really feel like an album that as a whole is going to have much longevity. There are a few tracks that have some impact, and that's about it. I think Existor is a pretty solid 6. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this album in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe. Also, I've been asked by a few people how you can support the channel directly, so I've made a PayPal Me link that you can send money to or whatever in the description below, and that'll basically help fund this channel for new equipment or just help me pay some rent. So if you like what I'm doing here and you want to support it, check that link out below. Also, check out my Instagram, my Reverb, and my Depop. Links to those are all in the description below. Thank you all so much again, and we'll see you on the flip side.